Hello, this is Terence Baker, News Editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa. Welcome to The Upgrade, the CoStar News Hotels EMEA podcast, coming to you monthly from our offices in London. I hope you're all doing extremely well. Very happy and grateful we have a wonderful guest on the podcast today, Bridget Baker. No relation to me, but as far as we know, maybe. Bridget Baker Consulting, based in Brighton. Bridget is a specialist in the nitty-gritty of hotels, the exciting, potentially dull stuff of absolute critical importance to getting hotels across the line, the planning process, getting through that unscathed and ready, finding finance, finding the right sponsors, doing the due diligence, all of that. It goes on and on and on, as we know in this industry, before you and I and the rest of the world have a pleasure of checking into our hotel rooms. Couple decades doing this. We won't say how many, but I've been in this industry for a long time too. Welcome, Bridget. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be part of your podcast.
Well, we're very happy to have you. How's Brighton today? Bit gloomy and grey here in London.
I want to pretend to the world that the sun is shining, but unfortunately it's wet and windy. But we do have a beautiful coast here, as many people know, a famous royal pavilion, which looks like an Indian palace. And it's very well known for its nightlife and hotel supply. We've got very famous hotels, including the Grand in Brighton, which was famous for a bad way that it was bombed by the IRA. And our Prime Minister of the time, Mrs. Thatcher, had to escape with her life. So
remember it very well.
Yes, it's a famous destination for some people for that reason, but it's a big leisure destination. I am actually a local person, but with my job, I travel the world. I cover UK, Europe, Middle East, Africa, looking at hotel projects and conference centres, actually. But today I think we're going to talk about the UK, which is incredibly important to me and where 80% of my work takes place.
We are talking about the United Kingdom, Bridget, and essentially the ramifications to the industry here following the budget. November 26, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, published her second budget, much on the back of a hostile press, it has to be said, who were anti what they thought would be whole-scale tax rises. Could be argued, and I'm sure she does, is that she's been a bit heavy-handed now to give us all glorious fiscal headroom in the foreseeable future. But let's get down to some of the things that they said there. National insurance contributions, that's been a real weight on our British and hotel industry since the last budget in 2024. That seems to be continuing. How do you see that weight on operations?
Well, already since the previous budget, it's widely reported, and Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality, who's got, incredibly well regarded, and all the facts and figures are there. 100,000 jobs were lost between the last budget and current budget in hospitality. And hospitality obviously covers a wide range from hotels, restaurants, pubs, which are very special to the UK, and other leisure activities. So 100,000 jobs is enormous. And the reason largely is because of the massive increase in employer labour costs to the government. Previously, anybody who worked about 1 day a week, maybe as a student who did some, I've got a client who runs a leisure club with conference space, and they have lifeguards one day a week, students working at the weekend. Previously, they didn't have to pay any national insurance contributions because they were earning under £9,100 a year. So now, anybody earning more than £5,000, we as employers have to pay national insurance, which when you multiply that by many numbers of staff, and particularly in our sector where we rely a lot on casual and students in the summer holidays or Christmas, younger people wanting to get a step or earn a bit of money, they're now costing an employer far more. So what has happened in the intervening year is many employers are saying, well, hang on a minute. Am I going to take a student for 6 weeks? Takes me a week to train them, and they've gone in 6 weeks, and I'm being clobbered by extra cost. And that particular venue I talked about there, their profit is reduced by 20%, £150,000 extra in labour cost, and they only have 20 full-time staff. The rest are all these casuals. And students who desperately want to work, get on the ladder, get experience, and they are actually not going to be taken on. And that's my biggest concern, is the impact on young people. I live in a tourist town, and in the past, you could walk into any job. You know, you could find a job in a cafe, a nightclub, in the bar. Several of my friends, their kids are at uni, and they've been asking me, we can't find, my son or daughter can't find a job this summer. This is weird. Why not? We live in Brighton where there's all these food and beverage outlets and hotels. Why can't my child get a job this summer? And it's because the employers are not giving the part-time jobs and paying this
Yes.
extra pay, because they'd rather give the hours to somebody already there, maybe give overtime, and not train up somebody who, to be fair, in the first few weeks doesn't perform as well as somebody that's been there, you know, for a couple of years. And they'd rather do that because it costs them too much.
The idea that companies need people who start running when they come in a job, they don't have this ability to step back a little bit and train somebody. I
That's
mean, we
right.
talked about the
Yes.
pricing differential, the salary differential from 9,100 from 5,000. I mean, that's 100% salary increase, isn't it? I mean, no one's getting that. So to drop down in terms of those who are now eligible to, or for companies who are eligible to pay tax on that is quite considerable. So are we going to lose, Bridget? We're going to lose a whole generation or two or three
I
of
think
new
so.
staff.
I think so. Because I started in hospitality at 13, and I worked at a very famous botanical gardens in Sussex called Wakehurst Place, which is linked to Kew Gardens. And I did ice creams every Sunday, which was
I know
lovely,
it
or
well. I
washing
know
up.
Wakehurst Place.
Aha. It's a beautiful, and it's got the Millennium Seed Bank, which is internationally renowned for guarding all the world's seeds to make sure things are preserved. So I used to work every Sunday washing up the first year for 4 hours and then selling ice creams. And okay, we don't let kids work at 13 anymore, but many people start in hospitality. I've stayed there all my life, but others are passed through. And now I looked up some statistics before we came on, and there's massive unemployment now between the 18 and 24-year-old age group. It's actually at the highest ever at 13.4%. And in the past, I'm sure a lot of those young people would have naturally ended up in hospitality and then maybe stayed there or moved on. So the problem is their pay now, the minimum pay for that age group has gone up by over 10%, the minimum living wage for them. So somebody at the moment on that age is on about, who was £17,900. From next April, it's going to go up to £22,600. So with the best will in the world and the best well-meaning employer who wants to get these youngsters into our businesses, to have to pay them 22,600 a year, where most of them have never had a job, and you've got somebody there who's 25 is earning roughly the same, they're not going to get a look in,
It's not
which is
rocket science, is it?
concerning.
It's not
No,
rocket
it's not
science at
rocket
all.
science.
And how are mum and dad looking at their precious little children getting into his industry? Presumably, they never were, I don't think, not in the United Kingdom. We've not really grown up in a culture where we are programmed to serve other people. Sometimes the
Oh,
best general managers in the world supposedly are British or Swiss or whatever. But overall, no. So how are mum and dad looking at their children going into our industry? Probably negatively, I imagine.
Well, I think even when I started and I wanted to go and do hotels at college, and I was told I was far too clever by my teachers at school, by career advice, and you're too clever to do that. I said, yeah, but I'm going to travel the world, which I have. I've been to, 50 or 60 countries I've worked in over the years, but it is always had a problem with education and people saying, oh, it's a secondary type of job. As I say, I was asked recently by friends, and they kind of just think, oh, hospitality, it's kind of as it's not a career and whatever, and why can't my kid get a job? Well, it's going to get worse because they're not going to get in. And funnily enough, my two children do work in hospitality, one at a hotel and one in the cinema. But the team spirit in hospitality, I was out with my friends for Christmas lunch 2 weeks ago, who I worked on the front desk in London in 1979, and we meet up 3 times a year. And there's those friendships that are when you're on a late shift or dealing with quite difficult days in a hotel, you come together and there's a lot of bonding and support for each other. And I think I always sell to, I'm sometimes asked to go into schools to talk and about hospitality as a career. And I always put up the map of where I've worked and famous people I've met over the years when I've been working in hotels. But it's it's a big hard sell anyway, and I think it's going to get more difficult if their child, can't get a look in. Because a lot of people who end up in hospitality actually are there by accident and never left. Other people come in for a few years and then do something else, but you talk to many people and they say, oh, yeah, when I was there, I used to work in a pub in the summer, or I worked at a festival doing the food van or whatever. And it's a rite of passage, really. So I think it's already been hard to persuade the parents, and I don't think it's going to get any easier, really.
Not any easier, absolutely. And I think we ought to bring you and your two friends onto another podcast. I mean, I'd be fascinated to share some of your experiences across
Wow.
those number of years. Also, slightly changing the subject, I read on the BBC this morning, Bridget, that loneliness, usually you think of loneliness as a problem for retired people or single people who are 70 plus, but they actually said that the loneliness they're seeing now, and perhaps it's because younger people are more ready to talk about mental health and things along those
Maybe.
nature, but they're
Yeah.
seeing loneliness increase dramatically between that 18 and 24, 25-year age group. A lot of that has to do, so they said, with a working from home culture during COVID. Then also the rents are so high. They're often living with three or four different people whom they don't necessarily like or did not know before that living arrangement came into
Yeah.
place. So, this all wraps up into this notion of confidence, of getting a job, getting out there, those usual stepping stones we all have in life. And some of them are perhaps being eroded slightly.
I agree. When I moved to London, I started my career in a local hotel where we called it industrial release. I think they call it placement now from college, and they gave me a job. Then I moved to London, and in those days, the hotel groups had hostels for their staff. And I was in Maida Vale, and I had to share with two other girls who I'd never met in my life. Um, and they were all worked in the Grand Metropolitan Hotels, it was called at the time, very big hotel group in London. And everyone worked in hotels. So you made friends, you went out together after work. And as you're on shift work, some people around in the morning, you got to know people from all walks of life. And as I say, in my case, my two late 20s children, I call them children, they've grown up, obviously, they both work in hospitality. And there is that element of teamwork. And you notice it after work, people go out for a drink, it still goes on. And I do feel for those young people in lockdown who was stuck. I was on so many Zoom calls, and there was this young trainee sitting in the corner maybe working at a surveying firm, listening in on the call in some little bedroom, not meeting anybody, which is awful. And
Indeed.
I
And it's
think,
difficult it's difficult to
yeah.
meet people when all the pubs are closing as well.
Well, there's one probably closed since we started this call, sadly. It's so well, I mean, I'm not a pub expert, but I think what is important, I live in a tourist destination and people like to come to a destination because of the nightlife, the activities that are going on, be it retail or pubs, and pubs are very special. I was in Mayfair last night having a drink with some hotel mates of ours, and we were in a lovely pub and it was heaving. And, it's incredibly hard for pubs at the moment they've got increased rates coming again, property taxes in the new year, and they're already, snowed under with cost. And how much will people end up paying for a pint of beer, or because it's getting too expensive.
Seven
And
or eight quid.
I know, and there's loads of stats out there. As I say, it's not my area particularly, but how much of the pint of beer goes to the actual publican who runs the business
Indeed.
is like about £1. So, it's very concerning because we all need each other to survive in hospitality. The hotels, people will go out and enjoy a city or a town and go to visitor attractions. It all feeds together. So the cost pressures, where you're an industry that takes on entry level jobs, and when you're being clobbered, the trouble is with the national insurance cost increase, the customer, in the end, the customer will have to pay more for that product, be it a hotel bedroom or a meal or whatever, for the business owner to make enough money. So it might deter people going out to spend. So I suspect that in 26, after we've had the Christmas, everyone goes out at Christmas for works dues or meets friends for Christmas. It'll probably be pretty grim, I think, in the new year. Probably more job losses.
Probably will.
Yeah.
And I think our readers know when we're talking about our currency, I think our listeners know that pound sterling, is the same as a quid, which is a term we get from Latin back in the day. So I apologize if I was using some slang there.
Oh,
But talking about those property taxes and the business
yeah.
rates, they're a real massive weight. I mean, there's been a lot of industry worrying, concern, and lobbying for government to look at the rateable values and the business rates paid by hospitality companies, which generally occupy a larger space than other businesses would. I mean, that's one of the main critical aspects of that. What I mean, what is it? What is the government's not hearing or seeing? Are they looking at their offices at Westminster and just seeing a stream of tourists flocking by
Yeah,
Westminster on the way to Borough Market and the South Bank and Tower
probably.
of London? I mean, what? Two questions: what is the government not seeing, and what do you think is going to happen to business rates and property taxes, or just more of the same, more of that weight on owners?
Well, I've just been talking in recent days about the implications to various businesses, but there was something yesterday, I think it was on the BBC or PMQs or something. A hotel next year will increase their property tax by 115%, which a regular hotel, obviously the trouble with a hotel, you get them all sizes, etc., but they say an average hotel, whatever they mean. So that's nearly £29,000 increase next year on property tax for a hotel. A pub is going up, that's at 115% more than currently, and pubs are going, I think, 15%. And they're already on their knees, pubs, as we've just discussed. So a hotelier, again, property tax is a fixed cost. So you don't, for example, if you sell less food, obviously you buy less food if you can budget well, etc. But it is perishable. But if you have to pay it, the fixed cost. It's not variable if the hotel is 50% full or 90% full. That fixed cost is there. So £29,000 additional tax for a hotel. And I think it's easy for, as you say, people sitting in Westminster and looking out and hordes of people walking around. Is the UK comprises London and the regions, and there's exceptions, of course. We've got the capital of Edinburgh, etc. But largely, the obviously the politicians sit in. They're meant to be from regional, represent regional seats, etc. The civil servants, etc., sit in Whitehall, but the regions is forgotten, and people hear the sky high room rates that some London hotels achieve, which obviously CoStar STR know all about that. But in the regions, an increase of £28,000 on your fixed cost is massive if you are a hotel luckily doing 65% with an average rate of £70. It's a massive amount of money. I think, unfortunately, we've always been the poor relation. It's not regarded. We are probably the third biggest industry in the UK, hospitality and leisure. We pay massive taxes. We create loads of jobs. And I'm always, the biggest pleasure I have in my work is getting a new opening and having, for example, the Hilton Humberside Airport, which is an area of high unemployment near Hull. And when you create a job, and it was built by a local firm from Hull, etc., when you create jobs, it's very satisfying. I think that's the most satisfying part of my job, is knowing you are creating economic growth and job creation. So those places are largely forgotten, and I think it's not through want of trying from, as I say, Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality is a fantastic lady, but I think even now, local MPs, you are hearing people are speaking up in Parliament, but sadly, I think they don't see hospitality as a sexy industry, like creating, pharmaceuticals, etc. And it's just not given the worth that it has. And it's some countries you go to, hospitality is so important, and they do anything to get new hotels. Other countries that I work in where they're desperate for more tourism. Well, in the UK, it's not always that situation. Not
Indeed.
always.
And going back to the employment situation, I would say about 10 years ago, the government, whoever was power, was probably a Conservative government at the time,
Yeah.
they put forward a new apprenticeship scheme, which was largely, the hotel industry was quite bullish about it, I remember. They said, no, it's just really well organised and it's a good opportunity. That kind of went by the wayside. And just a couple months ago, or last month, that was kind of the government, the Labour government now, tried to revamp that. Is apprenticeships the right answer, or are they still not going into our industry?
No, I think the idea of apprenticeships is a good idea. Particularly, we've always had in recent decades, a massive shortage of chefs, kitchen chefs, and that has been a good opportunity to get youngsters in the kitchen. And I do think actually some of these TV programs have helped enormously, where you watch these chefs, doing amazing things, and people think, aha, that's for me. The problem with the new scheme that's announced a couple of weeks ago is it's for a few regions, or no, more than a few, some regions in the UK, such as Southwest and the Midlands, etc. And not particularly, I think, London or the southeast of England, which is fine. The trouble is, it's great as an employer. I think most people are decent employers, and we all want to take on young people. However, there isn't any jobs. Even if the employer gets paid to take that person on for X time, is there any work for the person when they've just laid off 100,000 people? And it would be illegal to make somebody redundant to take on another person doing the same job,
Yes.
wouldn't it?
Yes.
So that is and there's new legislation went through Parliament yesterday, even more pressure on employers and rights of the employee, etc. And I think employers in the Southwest obviously includes wonderful Cornwall and Devon and etc. It is highly seasonal. So where are these jobs going to be? That's my question, because they've already laid off 100,000 people last year. And as I say, the predictions are more jobs are going to go in the new year after the Christmas rush. That's widely regarded as likely. So I think a decent employer would not take on an apprentice and then say they get paid to have them. When that apprenticeship comes up, have they got a job for them?
Indeed.
So
And the
that is
people
my
I
concern. It won't make any difference. I can't see it making any difference.
the people I've spoken to since the budget, a lot of people said the budget was very good, but these people were on the transaction side of the equation. The
Yeah,
the ownership, the selling of single assets, the conversion of office to hotels.
yeah.
They all said that the budget was not as bad as people made out. We've been talking about the operations side, and it seems to me quite terrible in the United Kingdom. So we're dependent on you, Bridget, to come up with some green
Green
shoots
shoots.
on the operational side of the hotel industry.
Green shoots is, I think, we are incredibly good, this country, at doing events, as evidenced by running football tournaments, concerts, etc. And weirdly, in the past, there were some destinations in the UK that it was predominantly business travel occupying hotels. And I think more and more with these events that happen, some of these concerts, I mean, it's well documented in the CoStar stats, is it generates a massive amount of room nights. And before I've looked at hotel projects where the leisure was really quite small, but venues, and that does come in with the venues that I do, it isn't only business travel. And I think people are willing to stay the night at a hotel as an outing, and it is helping hotels. So I think the events market has actually come back quite well in the conference side because of all the people working from home. Still, a lot of people do. They need to get out and see people. So they go to conferences to see people. It might be a one-dayer, but they still might stay the night. Others are multiple day conferences. People who are working predominantly from home, and of which there are quite a few, need to network. Networking is why most of us go to conferences. We all, of course, do listen to the sessions. Of course we do. But in the end, most of the business is done in the coffee area or actually in the bar. So that is good for hospitality, and I don't see that dropping off. So hotels with conference space or near a venue, it could be a sports stadium, it could be a concert destination, etc., should aim at getting that market more, do packages, whatever.
And the numbers certainly point to, Bridget, people perhaps cutting back on a dinner or something at home and spending more on these big events, whether it's Glastonbury or some other huge concert, or whether it's Taylor Swift or whoever's playing. Next year,
Exactly.
I believe Take That are on tour. That might
Right. Oh,
bring some
oh.
money. Not
Well,
really
who
my type of
knows?
not my
Who
type of
knows?
thing, but there you go. People like them. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. I think we're still seeing a lot of money being spent on events with hotel stays. So that is
Yeah,
one green shoot we can all
yeah,
hold on to. But
yeah.
I mean, in conclusion, next year is it feast or famine, or is it depending on what your interest is in the hotel industry?
I think, sorry, I heard there. I think that London, although obviously they are saying, oh, our room rates are going down, but there's been a lot of new, very high end openings, which has taken a while to drop in. I mean, I've been in London twice this week, and you have to walk on the road virtually to get along Piccadilly, etc. I mean, there's a lot of tourists still here, and which is fantastic. And I think London will always do well despite it might go down a smidgen on occupancy, but it's an international popular destination. Venues where there's big sporting events, I think like the Manchesters, the footballer fans come from all over Europe to go to watch and stay in hotels in Liverpool, football, etc. And I do think that certain historic destinations are still very appealing to international visitors, be it the Oxford, the Cambridge, where there's been filming. Often, weirdly, that generates demand for hotel rooms. You had it in Northern Ireland with various things that were filmed there. So you get these oddities. So I think country house hotels with conferencing facilities are suffering more because there is the issue whereby a lot of corporates now want to get their delegates to use public transport as much as possible, and that whereby country house hotels where you have to drive to can be off-putting because it's not good for their green credentials. So they're having a harder time, I think, to get some big conferences. So it depends what business you are. Budget's always going to do well because people need a bed for the night for whatever reason. And the high end, people like to treat their other half or friends to a special away somewhere. Spa's very popular, and golf is back. Golf hotels are doing well as well. So, yeah. So
There
it's
you
not all
go.
bad news. It's not all bad news.
That
Yes.
is wonderful to hear, and I'm sure our listeners are very happy to hear that too. Bridget Baker from Bridget Baker Consulting, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful to hear your insight. I wish you a very happy holiday and New Year, and thank you to the listeners. I hope you have a wonderful holiday or rest or Christmas or whatever it is you celebrate or don't, or you just need a rest of this time of year, and we look forward to seeing you next year. I'm Terence Baker for The Upgrade, CoStar, News Hotels, Europe, Middle East and Africa podcast, signing off.
Hello, I'm Luke Haynes, People Newsletter Editor, CoStar News, and the host of Top Credentials, a monthly podcast exploring the colourful careers of those working at the top of UK commercial real estate. In the episodes, we discover the valuable lessons influencing the daily decision-making of property sector leaders, and hear about the aspects of their job that make it a little easier to get out of bed each morning. We'll also ask for their views on the latest news and policies shaping our constantly evolving industry, and even get them to share a famous quote or song title they think defines their career or the profession. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of The Upgrade was recorded on the 18th of December 2025 and edited by Sean McCracken. Visit costar.com/hotel news for the latest on the global hotel industry and search for all of our podcasts on your platform of choice.